Hey, great to have you here. So today we're going to be talking about the newly released Netflix horror movie called Fear Street Prom Queen. So I did an in-depth trailer breakdown for this film, and I think I captured most of the movie pretty well. This film has very loose ties to the original trilogy, mainly taking place at the same school that the characters from Part 2 went to. But the gist here is we have our main character, Laurie Granger, who along with 5 other girls is nominated for Prom Queen. Laurie's family has a bit of a dark past. Her mom has been rumored to have killed her father, and the story she's accused of doing was that she was a girl from Shadyside, which is the rough part of town, and he was a guy from Sunnyvale, so the more successful town, and she wanted to kill him for leaving her. So with that reputation, we now have Laurie trying to rebuild her family's name in this school that's trying to do the very same. Laurie's best friend Megan is kind of this class clown who plays a lot of pranks and smokes a lot of weed. Among the 5 other girls nominated for Prom Queen, we have one who's a drug dealer dating this older guy, and then the 4 others are part of this Mean Girls-like clique. As expected with the premise here, these prom queens start to become targets for this serial killer dressed in a red coat and a black mask. We get some other subplots as well, like Laurie and the main popular girl both being interested in the same guy. And overall, it plays out as a pretty straightforward slasher film. There isn't a lot of time spent by the characters trying to figure out who's responsible for this, and more time spent on being chased or having their peers killed in creative ways. Jumping into some of the pros and cons for the film, starting with the pros, the first one being, I thought the whole whodunit aspect of this film worked. There were a couple obvious red herrings here thrown in, but the killer reveal did wind up being someone who I didn't first guess. At the same time though, it was a reveal that could have been predicted, so it fits nicely within that balance of not being too predictable, but also not being too unpredictable. Second pro for the film, I'll say, I mentioned this already, but I thought the kills were mostly effective here. They had a nice blend of being both unique and visceral, but also not insanely gory. I would describe them as slightly more graphic than a Scream movie. I will say though, one of the kills near the beginning of the third act, I didn't really like as much because there was zero buildup and it just kind of suddenly happened. And then third pro for the film that I'll point out, this is pretty basic, but I really dug the soundtrack here. This taking place in 1988, we get a lot of classic 80s songs, things like Laura Branigan's Gloria. And now jumping into some of the cons I have for the film, the first one being, this wasn't necessarily big for me, but I feel like it is for a lot of people. The film didn't really have a strong Fear Street tie-in, outside of a few visuals and a random one thrown in during the credits. So fans of the original trilogy may be a little bit turned off by this. Second con I'll point out is that in typical slasher fashion, the kill locations were pretty conveniently set up where we get our victims actively choosing to go off on their own in this isolated part of the school that was for some reason still accessible during the dance. Or another one that comes to mind near the end of the film, we get an environmental kill that while it worked really well and looked cool, I'm not sure realistically if the room should have been perfectly set up for it the way that it was. And then third con I'll point out for this film, this was done a little bit better in this movie, but I've mentioned before, I don't love when movies give us the ending at the beginning, which they do very briefly here, so it kind of reveals a little bit more of the movie than I think it should have to warrant really including that scene at the beginning. Now jumping into some sub-scores for the film before giving a final overall rating. The first one being for plot, I'll give this one a 3 out of 5. The story's pretty basic here where we have our less popular girl next door, lead character being bullied by this group, and she has to overcome that struggle while also enduring this night of murder at prom. It's very much Mean Girls meets Scream or even something like Hard Eyes. Now for an entertainment score, I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5. I thought the characters here were all pretty solid, some being more critical to the plot and others serving as kind of your typical tropes. But I mostly had fun while watching this. There were some lulls, but with 1 hour and 30 minute runtime, its pacing is pretty good outside of a few scenes. It isn't meant to be taken super seriously, and it's very much more of your silly popcorn horror film. For a gore score, I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5. We do get a good amount of severed body parts shown here, but they happen pretty quickly and move on to the next scene. And for a scare score, I'm going to give this one only a 2 out of 5. There are a few tense scenes here where characters are hiding or battling with the killer, but this isn't a movie that really relies on jump scares or really has any eerie moments throughout it. And then for rewatchability, I'll give this one a 3 out of 5. With any whodunit film, you're going to struggle with multiple watches keeping you captivated, but I could see myself watching this once again in the future, either solo or with others. And now for an overall rating for the film, I'm going to give Fear Street Prom Queen a 7 out of 10. I've seen a lot of negative reviews coming out, and I think it's currently rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, but I had a good time with it. I think the main issue here is that fans may be disappointed by the lack of involvement with the previous 3 movies. We do get that end scene, but it's very vague. It does also follow a pretty vanilla formula established by slasher movies, but I was content with our killer reveal, and they even gave us a bit of a twist, even if it's been used before. But what do you think? If you've seen it, were you a fan of Prom Queen or the previous Fear Street trilogy? What parts did you like or dislike? And if you have seen it, where would you rank it amongst the now 4 Fear Street films? Make sure to subscribe for more horror movie reviews like this one, and sound off on all things Fear Street and slasher films in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.